This SUV with a 6T70 transmission was experiencing an extended delay when changing gears from reverse to drive due to a transmission control module pressure switch failure. I didn't have any check engine lights, but this repair is also applicable when there are codes like P0841, 842, 843, 872, 873, 877, and 878. Some other common symptoms are transmission slipping, bind-ups, as well as delayed shifting between gears. It's applicable to a wide range of vehicles with a first-generation 6T70, 6T75, and 6T80 transmissions, including the Chevrolet Equinox and Traverse, GMC Acadia and Terrain, Buick Enclave, LaCrosse, and Regal, and Cadillac SRX and XTS. Although access to the transmission may vary slightly from this first-generation Traverse I'll be demonstrating on here. The tools you need for this job are a slotted screwdriver, T25 Torx driver for the airbox, 8mm and 10mm deep well sockets, an 11mm socket, a 3-inch extension, a ratchet, a torque wrench capable of 80 to 108 inch-pounds, a small pick, the pressure switch installation tools that come with the pressure switch kit, which I'll link to in the description, a funnel, an oil catch pan, a jack and jack stands, and you may also want a light or two to help out with visibility. The supplies you'll need are replacement gaskets for both the transmission valve body cover as well as the valve body cover wire and connector hole, links in the description, the TCM pressure switch installation kit, some paper towels, and around 6 quarts of Dexron 6 transmission fluid, or around 10.5 quarts if you'll be doing the full flush, which I would recommend if it's been around 100,000 miles since the last transmission fluid change. Link to my video of how to do the full transmission flush in the card at the upper right corner of this video. Let's get started by setting the parking brake and popping the hood. In this Traverse, I'll first have to remove the airbox to access the transmission valve body cover. So I'll first have to remove the engine cover, disconnect the mass airflow sensor, crankcase breather hose, and evap purge line. Use the slotted screwdriver to loosen the intake hose clamps and remove the intake hose. Now use the T25 driver to remove all 6 screws holding the upper airbox in place. After those screws are removed, take off the upper airbox and remove the air filter. Now you'll be able to access the 10mm bolt securing the lower airbox on the right rear corner. After that bolt is removed, release the left front and rear of the lower airbox from the rubber grommets. Lastly, before removing the lower airbox unit, I also had to release the PCM from its holder and slide it over to the left to give me clearance from the wires. With all those hoses and wires out of the way, removing the lower airbox assembly is still fairly difficult, but with some patience it can be done. Then, after removing it, press the PCM back into place. Now lift the front end of the vehicle and support it along the frame with jack stands. Then use the slotted screwdriver to remove these 2 trim clips in front of the driver's side control arm to access the lower part of the transmission. Now it's finally time to drain the transmission. Use the 11mm socket to remove the drain bolt on the bottom of the transmission. Make sure to have the oil catch pan ready when you remove the bolt. As you can see, this transmission fluid was quite dirty, so definitely time for a full flush. After it's finished draining, reinstall the drain plug and torque to 80 inch-pounds. Moving up to the engine bay, use the slotted screwdriver to remove the red safety tab from the transmission wiring connector. Then insert the screwdriver from the left underneath the gray lever to release it. Now press the connector lever all the way to the right to release the connector, then move it out of the way. Use the slotted screwdriver to remove the transmission cooler line holder from the valve body cover. You should be able to remove the plastic clip without disconnecting the line, but it may require a little bit of force. Now it's time to remove the 14 10mm bolts securing the valve body cover. With the exception of the 2 studs, which hold a transmission cooler line on one side and a wire bundle on the other, the rest of the bolts are identical. For the stud on the right, securing the transmission cooler line, you will have to take off the 10mm nut first before removing the stud. Here I'm using an electric ratchet to speed things up, but a standard ratchet will work just fine. The bolt at the bottom right next to the subframe was the most difficult to access, but you should still be able to reach it with a deep well 10mm socket. When you remove the final 2 bolts at the bottom, be prepared for a small amount of transmission fluid to splash down. Then slide the cover up and out of the engine bay. Take the slotted screwdriver and release the 2 connectors from the top of the transmission control module and reposition the wires out of the way. Then use a pick to release the locking tab from the connector on the bottom right and disconnect it as well. Now, before removing any bolts from the TCM, it's very important that you mark the exact position of each bolt as their different sizes and lengths. The easiest way I found to do this is by making a rough drawing of the TCM on cardboard with each of the bolt positions marked and punch a hole at each position. That way, as I remove each of the 11 bolts, I simply slide it into its corresponding position in the cardboard. You'll be using a combination of 8mm and 10mm sockets to remove these bolts. Here I've circled all of the 10mm bolts with white and 8mm bolts with orange. It doesn't matter which order they're removed in, but the numbers on this cardboard will be the torque sequence for later when we're reinstalling. Also, it's very important not to drop the TCM. So as you're removing the bolts, leave one in place to temporarily hold it until you have a good grip on it and are ready to take it out. I chose to slide the top bolt back in but not tighten it. Then it was very easy to slide the last bolt out and lift the TCM up and out of the engine bay. Immediately after removing, it was readily apparent that I had 2 out of 4 laminated discs that had completely failed and a third that was mostly torn. Moving everything over to the workbench, I'm going to start with a bit of cleanup. You can see here on the valve body cover where the transmission dipstick sits. Take out the dipstick and clean and inspect the O-ring, then reinsert it into the valve body cover. Clean around the valve body cover wiring connector hole and around the valve body cover gasket. I would highly recommend replacing the gasket anytime this cover is removed. So remove the old gasket, clean around the groove, and press the new one into place. The easiest way to find the correct orientation is by using this curve around the lower right bolt hole. After seating the new gasket, it's time to move on to the TCM itself. First, remove the wiring connector hole gasket, clean around the wiring connector, and then install a new gasket. Make sure the holes in one side of the gasket are facing down towards the TCM. Flipping over the TCM, remove the 4 seals around the orange laminated discs. This is easiest done with a pick or small screwdriver. Now use the pick to remove all 4 laminated discs. If you have any that the center is completely blown out on, you still have to remove the outer ring of the laminate discs for the new ones to seat properly. Also, even if you still have some good discs, it's best to go ahead and replace all 4 at the same time. If you happen to have the white plastic piece underneath the laminate disc come out, just set it back in with the flat side up. To install the new laminate discs, keep in mind that they're slightly larger than the opening, so they don't need to be tucked underneath. Try not to puncture or crease the disc any when sliding it in. I found using one of the tools included in the kit was very helpful to get the disc underneath the lip without damaging it. After getting all of the laminated discs in place, it's time to use the seal insertion tool to press the new seals in. First, assemble the piston inside the seal installer. Next, wipe a little transmission fluid or assembly lube onto the new seal and insert it narrow side first into the tool. Now take the seal plunger and work the wide part of the seal into the installer tool. It takes a little practice to get it to slide in correctly. You'll need to make sure that the seal is uniformly inserted into the seal installer. If the wide portion of the seal isn't fully seated inside the installer, take it out and try again. Once you have it prepped, firmly place the installer against the laminated disc and press down on the plunger. While holding pressure on the plunger, slide the installer up, then remove the tool. The wide portion of the seal should now be under the lip of the opening, but it will probably need a little assistance with a flat installation tool to fully press it into position. This tool is designed so as not to go in deeper than the seal and damage the laminate disc. Using the tool, gently press all the way around the seal until it's uniformly round and there's no gaps between the plastic of the TCM and the rubber seal. Now press in the remaining 3 seals and dress up their position with the installation tool. Before reinstalling the TCM into the transmission, first go back to the engine bay and wipe down the transmission valve body cover sealing surface. As I mentioned before, the TCM bolts are all different lengths, so keeping track of which one goes where is very important. To assist with reinstalling the transmission, and to make it easier to tell which bolts go where with just a side profile view of the TCM from inside the engine bay, I took bolt number 1 and slid it into its corresponding location on the TCM. Now, while being extremely careful not to drop the TCM, slowly lower it into place and slide the bolt into its correct hole in the transmission. Before installing any more bolts, double check the wiring connectors to make sure they're not tucked in behind the TCM. Now you can get the rest of the bolts started in each of their proper places. If you do use cardboard like I did, make sure that you wipe down the threads of each bolt prior to installation to make sure that you don't have any paper stuck to the threads. It's very important not to use power tools on these bolts, as accidentally over-tightening can cause serious issues. For bolts 3 and 4 in the middle of the right side, you'll need to swing the spring back into position on the right side before starting these bolts. Now get all 11 bolts hand tight before torquing. Each bolt will need to be torqued to 9 foot-pounds or 108 inch-pounds in the proper sequence, starting at the center and working your way out. You'll have to switch between 8mm and 10mm sockets during tightening. Reference this schematic for the proper sequence and socket size. After torquing all 11 bolts on the TCM, reconnect all 3 connectors that go underneath the transmission valve body cover. For the valve body cover, I also made a cardboard schematic for all 14 bolts and the torque sequence that secure it to the transmission. They're all the same length, so specific placement of each of these isn't important, with the exception of the 2 studs, which will go at positions 3 and 8. As you slide the valve body cover in place, there are alignment tabs at the top right and bottom left to help you get everything lined up. Go ahead and start all the bolts and get them hand tight before going back and torquing each to the same 108 inch-pounds. If you do use power tools to run in the bolts, just make sure to stop before the bolt is all the way in to prevent over-torquing, then go back and manually torque to spec. After all the bolts are torqued, reattach the wheel well liner to the side of the subframe with the trim clips. Then use a jack to lift the front end, remove the jack stands, and lower it back to the ground. Moving back to the engine bay, use a slotted screwdriver to pry the transmission cooler line to the side to allow you to slide the retaining clip into the valve cover. Attach the wiring harness to the stud on the left side and the transmission cooler return line holder to the stud on the right, and tighten the 10mm nut to secure it. Take the transmission wiring connector and press it into place, then secure it by moving the lever to the left until it clicks into place and reinsert the red safety lock. Now it's time to refill with transmission fluid. If you have a way to measure the old fluid that was drained out, that's the best way to refill with the exact amount that was drained. It should be around 5 quarts, but overfilling could cause significant damage to the transmission. You won't be able to check with a dipstick until the transmission is warmed up, so measuring the drained fluid is the most accurate way to refill. If it's been close to 100,000 miles since the last transmission fluid change, I would highly recommend flushing the transmission fluid as well. Link to that video in the card in the upper right corner. Doing just a drain and refill of the transmission like this, without a full flush, will leave a substantial amount of old fluid in the radiator and torque converter. After refilling the transmission, you won't be able to check the level just yet, so for now, just reinsert the dipstick and get the airbox installed. For a little extra clearance for the airbox, release the PCM from its holder and set it to the left. Now carefully reinsert the airbox, cold air intake tube first, and work it back into position around the wires and hoses. Once it's back into place, press the grommets on the front and back of the left side and reinstall the 10mm bolt on the right rear corner. Place the air filter back in and close it up with the upper airbox. Secure it with the 6 T25 torque screws. Replace the PCM in its bracket. Connect the airbox to the throttle body with the intake hose and use the slotted screwdriver to secure the clamps on each end. Reinstall the crankcase breather hose, evap purge line, Then connect the mass airflow sensor connector. Finally, reinstall the engine cover by removing the oil fill cap, press it into the retaining grommets, then reinstall the oil fill cap. Now you're almost done, but first you'll have to take it for a short test drive to warm up the transmission to get an accurate fluid level before checking on the dipstick. After the test drive, park on a level surface and leave the engine running. After letting the engine idle for a few minutes, check the level with the dipstick. Add more fluid if low and keep checking periodically until it gets within the normal range. Keep the engine running until you're finished adding fluid. I hope this video was helpful. If so, don't forget to click the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Drop any comments or questions you have in the comments section below, and also check out my Traverse playlist for all of my Chevy Traverse related videos.